The alarm sounds at 4:30 in the morning, cutting through the darkness of a small farmhouse just outside Millbrook. There's something sacred about this hour, when the world is still and the stars burn bright overhead without competition from streetlights or neon signs. The kind of darkness that wraps around you like a blanket, heavy and complete. The driver rises without hesitation, feet finding the floor, body moving through a routine perfected over 7 years of early mornings. Down the hallway, quiet on the stairs, avoiding the third step that creaks. Into the kitchen where the stove light casts a warm glow, just enough to see by without shocking the eyes into wakefulness too quickly. The coffee maker gurgles to life, an old machine that's been faithful for longer than anyone can remember, the kind of appliance that becomes part of the family through sheer persistence. While the coffee brews, there's a moment at the window. Outside, nothing is visible except the faint outline of an oak tree against the stars, but the driver knows what's there. The garden plot his wife tends with such care. The tire swing that hung from that oak tree when their daughter was small, before college took her away to other places. The gravel driveway leading out to County Road 12, where this day's journey will begin. The coffee pours dark and steaming, just a splash of milk, no sugar. Some habits are held onto not because they make sense, but because they connect us to people who came before, words spoken years ago that lodge themselves in the muscle memory of daily life. The first sip is always the best, that moment when the caffeine hasn't kicked in yet but the ritual promises it will, when the day is still full of possibility. Upstairs, the shower runs hot, steam filling the small bathroom, washing away the last remnants of sleep. Dressed in brown, the uniform that's become a second skin. Brown pants, brown shirt, brown boots worn smooth and comfortable. There's something about a uniform that changes you when you put it on, a shift in identity, a stepping into role. No longer just a man, but a representative of something larger, a connection point in a vast network of movement and delivery. The note on the refrigerator, written in familiar handwriting the night before. A simple message about breakfast, about remembering to eat, signed with love. These small touchstones matter more than grand gestures. A marriage lived in opposite schedules, ships passing in the night, sustained by refrigerator notes and occasional weekends when both are home at the same time. The evening shift at the hospital, the early morning delivery route. Two people building a life in the margins between work. Outside, the personal truck waits, a Ford F-150 that's seen better days but runs true. The engine turns over with a familiar rumble, headlights cutting twin beams through the darkness. The radio comes on, set to a classic country station that plays low, more companionship than entertainment. And then the drive begins. 30 minutes of back roads and solitude, time to prepare, to plan, to simply exist in the space between home and work. The roads are empty at this hour. Just the occasional deer at the roadside, eyes reflecting green in the headlights. A fox trotting across the pavement, urgent on some midnight errand. The sky begins to lighten in the east, that gradual transformation from black to navy to purple-gray that happens so slowly you don't notice, until suddenly you can see the trees taking shape, the fields emerging from shadow. The distribution center appears ahead, a sprawling building of concrete and corrugated metal, lit up like a small city in the darkness. Already the parking lot is filling with vehicles. Early shift workers, other drivers, all converging on this point where the vast network of global commerce becomes local, where packages sorted halfway across the country get loaded onto trucks bound for specific routes, specific addresses, specific people waiting for specific things. The driver parks in his usual spot, third row near an oak tree that provides shade in summer, and walks toward the building. The air is cool, that autumn chill that promises winter's coming but hasn't quite arrived yet. Inside, the warehouse hums with activity. Conveyor belts moving, packages sliding, scanners beeping, voices calling out numbers and destinations. The loading docks are busy with semi-trucks backing in, disgorging their contents, the endless flow of boxes that define modern life. The break room holds a handful of other drivers at various stages of readiness. Some eating breakfast from vending machines, others staring at phones, a few just sitting with coffee, gathering themselves for the day ahead. There's a camaraderie here, the fellowship of people who share similar work, who understand the particular challenges and satisfactions of the job. Nods of greeting, brief conversations, the shared knowledge that everyone here will spend the day on similar missions in different territories. The morning meeting is brief but essential. The supervisor, a woman who's been with the company longer than most of the drivers have been alive, goes over the day's priorities. Volume is steady, neither light enough to make the day easy nor heavy enough to make it impossible. Some new addresses on the growing edges of their coverage area, places where forest and farmland are slowly giving way to development. Road work to avoid on one highway, and a reminder to watch for deer which are moving more than usual, restless as the seasons change. After the meeting comes the inspection. This is habit made ritual. The careful walk around the truck checking tires and lights, opening the hood to verify fluid levels, testing the horn and wipers and flashers. The truck is number 419, a step van with over 100,000 miles on it, worn but reliable. It pulls slightly to the left, a quirk compensated for automatically now. The key has to be jiggled just right in the ignition. The clutch has a sweet spot that takes time to learn. These imperfections make it familiar, transform it from generic vehicle to something known and trusted. And then, finally, the back doors open to reveal the load waiting inside. The packages are already stacked floor to ceiling, a three-dimensional puzzle that represents a full day's work compressed into one truck. This is where the art comes in, the skill that separates someone just doing a job from someone who's mastered it. Every box has been scanned and sorted, assigned a sequence number, fitted into the route like pieces of a complex jigsaw. The morning deliveries are loaded toward the back, accessible and ready. The afternoon stops are deeper in, organized by area and road. Heavy boxes sit low, anchoring the load. Fragile packages are secured where they won't shift when the truck brakes or turns. Envelopes and small parcels fill specialized bins, sorted by sequence, ready to grab without searching. This organization isn't arbitrary. It reflects deep knowledge of the route, an ability to visualize the day before it happens, to see in the mind's eye each turn onto each road, each driveway, each address. The truck becomes a physical map, a testament to memory and experience. Over time, certain patterns emerge, certain efficiencies reveal themselves. This is the wisdom that comes from repetition, from doing the same thing enough times that it transcends simple routine and becomes something close to instinct. Today's load is manageable, perhaps 120 stops, give or take, the usual mix of commerce and necessity. Amazon boxes, ubiquitous now, brown cardboard marked with that arrow smile. Packages from smaller online retailers, the long tail of internet commerce. Parts for farm equipment, clothing and shoes, books and supplies for the homeschoolers scattered through the coverage area, medical supplies for the homebound, birthday presents and early Christmas shopping. Each box a small story, a need or want being met, someone somewhere clicking buttons on a screen, and days later this physical manifestation appearing on their doorstep. One package catches the eye because the sender is familiar, a beekeeping supply company, and the address is the Kowalski farm. The old farmer had mentioned thinking about bees during a delivery last week, something to do with the time retirement was providing, now that the land was leased out and the heavy work was done. Apparently, he decided to go through with it. Come spring, there would be hives out behind that old farmhouse, bees working the clover and wildflowers, making honey the way they've done since before humans learned to farm. The driver makes a few small adjustments, moving boxes that aren't quite positioned right, creating clear pathways to the packages that will be needed first. Then the doors close, the The DIAD scanning device slots into its dashboard mount, and the engine rumbles to life. At 6:15, the truck pulls out of the lot, joining the stream of other brown vehicles heading out to their various territories. The sun is up now, fully up, painting everything in gold. The world is waking. School buses making their rounds, picking up children who wait at the ends of long driveways. Farmers already hours into their day, heading for morning coffee at whatever diner or cafe serves as the social hub of their particular community. The early shift at the factory, the opening crew at the grocery store, all the mechanisms of daily life beginning to turn. The route heads west, away from town, into the deep country. Within minutes, the landscape transforms. Houses spread out, no longer neighbors but isolated homesteads separated by fields and forest. Pavement gives way to gravel on some roads, to hard-packed dirt on others. The mailboxes become farther apart, the numbers on them spanning larger ranges. This is the territory where the rural route begins in earnest, where the work becomes something different from city delivery, where the relationship between driver and customer takes on particular qualities shaped by distance and solitude. The first stop is a dairy farm, the Matherson Place, 20 miles from the distribution center. They're early risers by necessity, up at 4 for the morning milking, and they appreciate the early delivery. The package today is from Tractor Supply, likely a repair part for equipment that can't afford to stay broken. The driveway is long, stretching a quarter-mile from the road past a barn where lights glow and milking machines hum. The truck pulls up near the house, engine idling, and before the driver can reach the back doors, a golden retriever appears, tail wagging so hard it creates a full-body shake of enthusiasm. The driver has learned to keep dog biscuits in his pocket. Rural roots mean dogs, lots of them, working dogs and pet dogs and the kind that fall somewhere between. This one, Buster, is friendly and familiar, accepting the treat with gentle teeth and offering his head for scratching in return. The package comes out, gets scanned, and the farmer's wife appears on the porch in barn clothes, coffee cup steaming in the cool morning air. She waves, calls out thanks, the interaction brief but warm. This is the rhythm of it. Quick stops, familiar faces, the accumulation of small kindnesses over time. The second stop is an auto repair shop, a small operation run by a father and son who do honest work at fair prices. The package is heavy, automotive parts from the weight of it, probably a fuel pump or alternator. The shop's bay door is open, classic rock playing on a radio somewhere inside, the younger mechanic already under the hood of a pickup truck. The driver carries the box to the door, gets a wave of acknowledgement, leaves it where it won't be in the way. No signature needed for this one. Trust built over years of deliveries, the understanding that packages left here will be safe. The morning continues in this fashion, stop after stop building into the texture of the day. A retired couple who have ordered new pillows. A young mother with 3 kids under 5 who gets regular deliveries of diapers and supplies, her car seats visible through the window, toys scattered across the yard. An artist working from a converted barn, packages of canvas and paint arriving like clockwork. A preparedness-minded individual whose deliveries run to freeze-dried food and camping gear, preparing for scenarios unnamed but clearly imagined in detail. By 9 o'clock, 20 stops are complete and the schedule is holding. The sun climbs higher, burning off the morning chill, promising a day of perfect fall weather. The kind of day that makes people grateful to be outside, grateful to be alive in this particular moment when the trees are turning and the air is crisp, and the light has that special quality it only gets in October. The road itself becomes a kind of conversation when you drive it often enough. Every curve and dip, every patch where gravel gives way to pavement, every place where tree branches hang low or where the shoulder drops off steep. The road speaks in the language of experience, teaching its lessons to those who travel it regularly, revealing its moods and personalities across the seasons. Take Hollow Creek Road, for instance. 8 miles of winding asphalt following the creek it's named for, running through a valley between two wooded ridges. In spring, when the snow melts and the rain falls heavy, the creek swells and sometimes jumps its banks, turning sections of the road into rushing streams that make delivery impossible for days. The driver has seen it wash out completely 3 different times, great chunks of pavement carried away by water that doesn't care about human constructions, that reasserts its right to flow where geology dictates. In summer, Hollow Creek Road becomes a tunnel of green, oak and maple, forming a canopy overhead that filters the sunlight into dancing patterns on the pavement. It's cool, even on the hottest days, a natural air conditioning that makes this stretch a relief after the sun-beaten fields elsewhere on the route. The creek runs low in summer, more suggestion than reality, pools connected by trickles, rocks showing through that stay hidden when the water's high. But now in fall, Hollow Creek Road transforms into something magical. The canopy that provided shade in summer now burns with color, red and orange and gold leaves backlit by sunlight, creating the illusion of driving through fire, through a tunnel of flame that doesn't consume, only illuminates. The wind pulls leaves loose and they spiral down, creating carpets of color on the pavement that crunch under the truck's tires. This is the reward for all the difficult deliveries, all the hard stops and long driveways. This beauty, this moment, this reminder of why living and working in the country matters. The driver knows every curve, could navigate this road in sleep if sleep driving were possible. There's the bend where hunters' dogs sometimes cross, the 3 beagles that belong to the old man in the house with the sagging porch. There's the low-hanging maple branch that requires watching the mirrors, the tree growing a little more each year, gradually encroaching on the traveled path. There's the place where pavement ends and gravel begins, that change in sound and feel that comes through the steering wheel, the tires singing a different song on different surfaces. Today, windows down to let in the autumn air, the driver listens to the world. Gravel crunching, birds calling, probably the crows that roost in the woods, their raucous voices carrying across the valley. The distant sound of a chainsaw, some property owner cutting firewood for winter, laying in supply for the cold months that are coming. These sounds form the soundtrack of rural America, the mechanical and natural blending into something that becomes normal, expected, the white noise of country life. A deer appears at the roadside, a doe standing still as a statue, watching the truck pass with those liquid dark eyes that seem to hold ancient wisdom. The driver slows automatically, knowing the rules of deer behavior, knowing that where there's one there are usually more. Sure enough, 2 more does step out from the trees and cross behind the truck, their white tails flagging, moving with that particular grace that wild things possess, unhurried but alert, aware of danger even in this moment of passage. The landscape tells stories for those who learn to read it. The corn in Peterson's field looking a little brown, which probably means the irrigation system is acting up again. Probably means Peterson is spending his mornings trying to fix it instead of doing the 1,000 other things that need doing. The new fence posts going up on the old Carmichael property, white plastic posts in neat rows, which probably means it finally sold after sitting empty for 3 years. Probably means new neighbors coming soon. Another family discovering the joys and challenges of rural living. The cattle in Harrison's pasture are all clustered in the northeast corner, huddled together despite the mild weather. This usually means a storm is coming, their animal senses picking up changes in air pressure or electrical charge, some instinct that tells them to gather and prepare. They're more reliable than any weather forecast, these cows, their behavior predicting rain or snow hours before the first drops fall or the first flakes appear. The route winds through different zones, different microclimates and landscapes that could be different worlds if you didn't know they were connected. The river bottom where the soil is dark and rich, where the farms are prosperous and the farmhouses well maintained, where generations have worked the same land and know every square foot of it intimately. The hilltop region where the wind blows constant, where trees grow twisted and bent, where the views stretch for miles across a patchwork of fields and forest, where hawks circle on thermals and the sky feels somehow bigger. Then the forest section, where logging roads branch off into darkness, where houses sit at the ends of long driveways invisible from the main road, where people have chosen isolation or found it chosen for them, where the world narrows to the space between trees and the sunlight comes filtered and scattered. Each area has its own character, its own people, its own particular set of challenges for delivery. The driver knows them all, has learned them through repetition, through seasons cycling past, through the simple act of being present and paying attention. Around 10 o'clock, the truck turns onto Oak Ridge Road, a narrow lane that winds through dense woods, barely wide enough for two vehicles to pass, no shoulders to speak of, just drainage ditches on either side waiting to catch the unwary. This is some of the most beautiful driving on the entire route, the forest pressing in close, creating intimacy, the canopy overhead creating patterns of light and shadow that shift with the wind, making the world seem to move even when standing still. 3 stops on Oak Ridge Road. The first is a cabin set back about a quarter-mile from the road, accessed by a gravel drive that's more ruts than surface. A couple from Chicago bought this place 5 years ago, retirement property, and they've thrown themselves into country living with the enthusiasm of converts. They garden, they can vegetables, they heat with wood cut from their own forest. Their packages reflect this transformation. Today it's heirloom seeds for next year's garden, planning ahead the way country people learn to do, thinking in seasons and cycles rather than weeks and months. The second stop is a mobile home tucked back in the trees, barely visible from the road. No one ever answers here. There's a covered box by the door specifically for deliveries, waterproof and secure, and a simple note asking for packages to be left there. The driver has been delivering to this address for 2 years and has never seen the occupant, never gotten a signature, never had any interaction beyond the scanning of packages and their placement in that box. Some people value privacy above all else, and in the country that's respected. Questions aren't asked. Judgments aren't made. Everyone's entitled to their own way of living. The third Oak Ridge Road stop is a different story entirely. The Thompson family, with their 4 kids ranging from 6 to 14, all homeschooled, the place a controlled chaos of activity and noise. Bikes in the yard, a trampoline, basketball hoops, the sound of violin practice coming from somewhere inside the house. Today's delivery is educational supplies, a box of textbooks and workbooks that weighs 40 pounds, the kind of load that makes the back and shoulders complain by day's end. The children appear before the driver even reaches the porch, tumbling out the door in a wave of enthusiasm, excited about the arrival of new books the way some kids get excited about toys. Their mother follows, wiping her hands on a dish towel, apologizing for the chaos in that way parents do when their children are behaving exactly as children should, with energy and curiosity and uncontained joy. She signs for the package, thanks the driver, and asks if everything's going well. These small interactions, these moments of human connection, they matter more than any metric or deadline. The door closes behind her, and the sound of children arguing cheerfully about who gets to unpack the books first drifts out the windows. The driver walks back to the truck, makes a note in the DIAD about the successful delivery, and heads to the next stop. The day continues to build, each delivery adding to the total, each interaction adding to the accumulated weight of human experience that makes this job something more than just driving around dropping off boxes. There's a particular skill to rural delivery that goes beyond the simple mechanics of driving and lifting. It's about reading situations, solving problems on the fly, adapting to circumstances that change from stop to stop and from day to day. City delivery has its own challenges, certainly, the traffic and parking and the sheer density of stops in a small area. But rural delivery is different. Out here, every stop is a unique situation, and success depends on a combination of knowledge, intuition, and willingness to make it work however you can. The driver pulls up to a farmhouse where the driveway is a half-mile long, and the recent rains have turned the last 100 yards into a muddy morass. The truck isn't going to make it down there without getting stuck, and calling a tow truck to pull it out would mean losing half a day and explaining to the supervisor why protocol wasn't followed. So instead, the driver grabs the package, puts on the rubber boots kept in the truck for exactly this situation, and walks the last section on foot, mud sucking at each step, finally reaching the house where the farmer meets him with an apologetic look and an offer of coffee. The next stop is a house at the end of a dirt road so overgrown with tree branches that it's like driving through a tunnel, branches scratching along the sides of the truck, creating that fingernails on chalkboard sound that sets teeth on edge. But the elderly woman who lives here is homebound, depends on deliveries for her medication and supplies, so the driver navigates the obstacle course carefully, emerging at a clearing where a small house sits surrounded by gardens gone slightly wild, beautiful in their semi-chaos. Another stop involves a gate across the driveway, locked, with a phone number on a sign asking deliveries to call ahead. The driver has been to this address before, knows the drill, calls the number and waits 5 minutes while the owner, whoever they are, presumably monitors on a camera to verify that it's legitimate before remotely unlocking the gate. Privacy taken seriously, security valued above convenience. The gate swings open. The delivery is made to a mailbox-style container at the end of the actual driveway, still 50 yards from the house itself, and the driver leaves without ever seeing the occupant or the building. Then there's the address where 3 dogs come charging out whenever the truck appears. Not aggressive but enthusiastic, wanting attention and pets and treats if there are treats to be had. The driver has learned to keep a supply of dog biscuits specifically for stops like this, a small investment that makes life easier and creates goodwill. The dogs recognize the truck now, probably before it even comes into view, and they're waiting at the edge of the property, tails wagging, ready for their routine. One particularly memorable address involves a creek crossing. The house sits on the far side of a small stream, accessed by a wooden bridge that's only barely wide enough for the truck, with no railings and boards that feel slightly soft underfoot. The first time making this delivery, the driver walked across on foot, sure that the bridge wouldn't hold the weight of the vehicle. But the homeowner assured that it was safe, that delivery trucks had been crossing it for years. Still, there's always a moment of tension when driving across, feeling the boards flex slightly, hearing the creak of wood under strain, hoping this isn't the day the bridge decides it's had enough. Another stop requires navigating around a flock of chickens that free ranges across the property, wandering wherever they please with no regard for vehicles or people. They scatter when the truck approaches, squawking indignantly, then immediately return to pecking at the ground as soon as the danger passes. The homeowner, a woman in her 70s who lives alone, keeps them for eggs and for company, and she's told the driver that each chicken has a name and a distinct personality, though to outside observers they all look the same. There's the address where the packages have to be left in a specific shed around back, never on the porch. And woe to the substitute driver who doesn't know this and leaves things in the wrong place, because the homeowner will call and complain and make it clear that instructions are meant to be followed. The driver has learned to make detailed notes in the system about special requirements like this, protecting future drivers from making the same mistakes, passing on knowledge in the only way the system allows. And there's the house where an elderly man always sits on the porch during delivery hours, watching the road, waiting for the truck. He's lonely, probably, living alone since his wife passed, and he wants conversation, wants to talk about the weather or politics or how things used to be different. The driver has learned to budget an extra 5 minutes for this stop. because sometimes human connection is more important than strict adherence to schedule, and 5 minutes won't make or break the day but might make or break someone's day. Each delivery is a small negotiation between ideal and reality, between the system's expectations and the actual conditions on the ground. The handheld device, the DIAD, expects certain things. It expects deliveries to happen within certain time windows. It expects routes to be followed in sequence. It expects efficiency above all else. But the reality of rural delivery is that sometimes you have to break sequence to avoid doubling back over bad roads. Sometimes you have to take extra time to navigate difficult situations. Sometimes you have to use judgment instead of following the script. The good drivers learn to work within the system while acknowledging its limitations. They learn when to follow the rules strictly and when to bend them in service of actually getting the job done. They learn that technology is a tool, not a master, and that sometimes the old ways, the ways that depend on human knowledge and experience rather than algorithmic optimization, are still the best ways. By noon, the driver has made perhaps 70 deliveries, nearly 2/3 of the route complete. The sun is high overhead now, the temperature climbing into the comfortable range, that sweet spot where it's warm enough to be pleasant but not so hot that physical labor becomes exhausting. The truck's air conditioning isn't great, never has been, but with the windows down, the breeze flowing through the cab is enough to keep things bearable. There's a natural breaking point in the route here, a moment when the morning deliveries are done and the afternoon ones begin, when the geography shifts from one area to another. The driver pulls into a gravel lot beside a small country store, one of those places that somehow survived when everything else consolidated into chains and franchises, still selling sandwiches and coffee and local gossip to whoever stops in. The country store sits at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. Two county highways intersect here, and the store serves as a gathering place for the community scattered across the surrounding rural area. It's not much to look at from the outside. Weathered wood siding, a gravel parking lot with potholes, a hand-painted sign that's been there so long nobody remembers when it was new. But inside, it's a hub of local life, a place where information flows as freely as the coffee from the ancient pot behind the counter. The driver pulls into the parking lot, parks in the shade of an oak tree, and takes a moment to just sit. This is the break point of the day, the natural pause where morning becomes afternoon, where the adrenaline of rushing through stops gives way to the steadier pace of the afternoon deliveries. The schedule allows for a 30-minute lunch break, not always taken but appreciated when it is, a chance to stop being in motion and just exist for a little while. Inside the truck, the silence is profound after hours of engine noise and radio and the sounds of the road. The driver turns off the ignition and the quiet settles in like a physical presence. There's the ticking of hot metal cooling, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the distant sound of a tractor somewhere, working a field out of sight. These are the sounds of rural America at midday, the sounds that city people never hear because they're drowned out by the constant noise of urban life. The driver pulls out a lunch packed that morning before the sun came up. A sandwich, an apple, a bottle of water. Simple food, working food, the kind of meal that provides energy without weighing you down. Eating alone in the truck, looking out over a vista of fields and forest, there's time to think about the morning's deliveries. The faces seen, the brief conversations had, the small interactions that add up to something larger than their individual parts. This job could be isolating if you let it. Hours spent alone in a truck, communicating with a handheld device more than with actual people, following routes that repeat day after day with only minor variations. But the driver has learned to see it differently. Every delivery is a point of connection, however brief. Every customer is a person with a story, with needs and wants and dreams just as complex as anyone else's. The packages aren't just objects being moved from one place to another. They're manifestations of hope and desire, things wanted and needed, awaited with anticipation. The woman who orders craft supplies is probably creating something beautiful in her spare time, making art in the quiet hours after work or family obligations. The man who gets regular shipments of books is probably building a library, educating himself, pursuing knowledge for its own sake. The family that orders educational materials is investing in their children, choosing a different path than the mainstream, betting that they can provide something better than what the system offers. Every package tells a story if you think about it enough. The seeds arriving now will become plants next spring, which will become food next summer, which will sustain the people who planted them. The parts for equipment will keep farms running, which means crops will be harvested, which means food will reach tables near and far. The medical supplies will maintain health, ease suffering, extend lives. The toys and books and clothes and all the other miscellany of modern commerce, each one matters to someone. Each one was wanted enough that someone searched for it, chose it, paid for it, waited for it. A pickup truck pulls into the lot and the driver recognizes it. Another local, someone whose route often intersects with the delivery route at this particular time and place. They wave to each other, a simple acknowledgement of shared space, fellow travelers on these country roads. The other driver heads into the store, probably for the same reason everyone comes here at midday. Coffee, a quick lunch, a few minutes of human interaction. The driver looks at the time. 15 minutes of the break gone, 15 remaining. The afternoon stops are visible in the mind's eye, a mental map of the territory still to cover. More farmhouses, a few small businesses. The nursing home where several residents get regular deliveries, where the staff knows him by name and always thanks him for being reliable. The address out on Route 7, where the owner has built an elaborate decorative mailbox in the shape of a barn, complete with tiny animals and painted details. The final 20 stops will take about 3 hours if everything goes smoothly, which it usually does but not always. There's always the possibility of a road closure, an unexpected detour, a customer who's not home when they said they'd be, a package that's bigger than expected and won't fit in the designated spot. But that's part of it, the variability, the understanding that plans are guidelines rather than guarantees. The driver starts the truck again, the engine turning over smoothly and pulls back onto the highway. The country store recedes in the mirror, back to its role as a landmark, a waypoint, a place that exists independently of any one person's use of it, but that serves everyone who knows about it. The road ahead is familiar, every curve and straightaway known, but still capable of surprise, still capable of showing something new even after hundreds of trips through this same territory. The afternoon sun shifts the light, changes the way everything looks. Shadows grow longer, angles change, colors deepen. The same landscape that was traveled this morning now appears different, transformed by the simple passage of time and the movement of the sun across the sky. This is one of the gifts of the rural route. The opportunity to see the same places under different conditions, to notice changes, to mark the passage of seasons and years through the small details of a familiar landscape. A hawk sits on a fence post ahead, watching the field beside the road with the focused intensity of a predator. As the truck approaches, it takes flight, wings spreading wide, riding the thermal currents, spiraling upward until it's just a speck against the blue. These moments of wildness, of nature doing what it does without regard for human activity, they're part of what makes this work worthwhile. The driver isn't just moving through this landscape. He's part of it, a participant in the ongoing story of this place. The afternoon deliveries begin with a cluster of houses along a road that follows a ridgeline, each property with commanding views across the valley below. These are retirement properties mostly. People who worked their whole lives in cities or suburbs and bought land out here for their final years, seeking peace and quiet and space. They're often the most appreciative customers, grateful for the delivery service that lets them live remotely, without giving up connection to the wider world of commerce and communication. One of these houses belongs to a couple who spent 30 years teaching in Chicago before moving out here. They order books constantly, 2 or 3 packages a week, building a library that will probably outlast them. The driver has seen their collection through the windows when delivering packages. Floor-to-ceiling shelves in every room, books stacked on tables, piled on chairs everywhere. They're not hoarders, they're readers. There's a difference. Every book represents hours of engagement, ideas considered, worlds entered. This is retirement as education, the final years spent learning everything there wasn't time for during the working years. Another house on this ridge belongs to a retired engineer who's taken up woodworking. His packages come from specialty suppliers, exotic woods, precision tools, finishing supplies. The driver has seen the results displayed on the porch. Beautifully crafted furniture, each piece obviously made by hand, each one showing the care and attention that comes from work done for love rather than profit. The engineer had mentioned once that he gave most of it away, to children and grandchildren, to friends, to anyone who admired a piece. The joy was in the making, not the having. Then there's the house where a woman lives alone with her 3 cats, ordering pet supplies and craft materials, and occasionally something unexpected like a telescope or a kayak paddle. She's creating a life on her own terms, pursuing interests as they arise, unbounded by what anyone else thinks is appropriate or normal. The driver has seen her out in her kayak on the small pond behind her house, paddling in circles while the cats watch from the porch. It's an image of contentment, of someone who's figured out how to be happy with simple things. The deliveries continue through the afternoon, each one adding to the day's total, each one a small mission completed. The sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, light taking on that golden quality that photographers love, that makes everything look slightly magical, slightly better than it actually is. The temperature begins to drop as well, that afternoon cooling that happens in fall, reminding everyone that winter is coming, that the warm days are numbered. What makes a rural route different from other delivery work isn't just the roads or the distances or the landscapes. It's the people. In the city, drivers might make 200 stops in a day, but few of them result in actual interaction. Packages left at doors, signatures scribbled hastily, everyone in a hurry to get on with their day. But out here in the country, things move differently. People have time, or they make time, for brief conversations, for acknowledgement of shared humanity. There's the farmer who always wants to talk about the weather, who can read the sky like a book and predict rain or snow days before it arrives. He's in his 70s now, still working the land he inherited from his father, who inherited it from his father before him. 3 generations of the same family working the same soil, planting the same fields, harvesting the same crops. That kind of continuity is rare in modern America, where mobility is valued and people move freely from place to place, following jobs or opportunities or simple restlessness. The farmer had told the driver once about the old days, before rural delivery existed, when getting packages meant a trip to town, which meant hitching up horses or later starting up an old truck, which meant time and effort and planning. The arrival of regular delivery service changed rural life as much as electricity or paved roads, connecting isolated farms to the wider world, making it possible to order things through catalogs and later online, having them arrive at your door without ever leaving home. There's the young couple who bought an old farmhouse and are slowly renovating it, doing most of the work themselves, learning as they go. Their packages reflect this ongoing project. Tools, building materials, instructional books about plumbing and wiring and carpentry. They're both in their 30s, working remote jobs that let them live anywhere with internet access, choosing this place and this lifestyle deliberately, betting that the satisfaction of creating something physical with their hands will outweigh the challenges and frustrations that inevitably come with old houses and DIY renovation. The driver has watched their progress over the past 2 years. The exterior that went from peeling paint to fresh siding. The porch that got rebuilt one weekend, boards replaced, railings straightened. The garden that appeared last spring, rows of vegetables planted with the optimism of beginners. Some thriving, some struggling, all of it a learning experience. They represent a particular kind of rural migration, city people moving to the country not to farm but to live, seeking space and quiet and a different pace of life. There's the elderly widow who lives alone in a house that's too big for one person, but that she refuses to leave because her memories are here. Because leaving would mean admitting that a chapter has ended. Her packages are often medical supplies, prescriptions delivered because she no longer drives, can no longer make the trip to town that used to be routine. The driver always takes extra time here, makes sure she's okay, offers to carry things inside if she needs help. This is beyond the job description, but it's part of being human, part of living in a community, even if that community is spread across miles rather than blocks. She had told the driver once about her late husband, about their life together on this property, about raising children here when the house was full of noise and activity. Now it's just her and the memories, and the deliveries are little lifelines connecting her to a world that keeps moving even when she feels like she's standing still. The driver understands that the few minutes of conversation during deliveries might be the only human interaction she has all day, and that understanding shapes how those minutes are spent. There's the family with the special needs child, a teenager who loves to watch the delivery truck arrive, who stands at the window tracking its progress up the driveway, who waves enthusiastically when the driver waves back. The parents had explained early on that their son finds comfort in routine, that the regular appearance of the brown truck has become part of his daily structure, something he can count on. So the driver makes sure to wave, makes sure to acknowledge the boy watching from the window, understanding that this tiny interaction might be the highlight of his day. There's the craftsman who works from a shop behind his house, creating custom furniture and cabinetry, ordering specialized tools and materials that aren't available locally. He's part of a new generation of rural artisans, people using the internet to market their work nationally or globally, while living and working in places far from urban centers. His Instagram account has thousands of followers, people who appreciate the traditional craftsmanship, the attention to detail, the beauty of things made by hand in a world increasingly dominated by mass production. There's the woman who runs a small online business selling handmade soap and candles, ordering supplies in bulk, shipping out packages almost daily, building a modest income from a spare bedroom converted to a workspace. She represents another version of rural entrepreneurship, using technology to overcome the limitations of geography, finding customers everywhere because the internet makes everywhere accessible. There's the prepper couple, as the driver thinks of them, who order freeze-dried food and survival gear, who have built a homestead designed to be self-sufficient, with solar panels and a well and gardens and chickens, and a root cellar stocked with preserved food. They're friendly enough, always polite, but there's an underlying tension to their preparations, a belief that the comfortable stability of modern life is more fragile than most people realize, that disruption is always just one event away. There's the professor who moved out here to write, leaving academia for a quieter life, ordering books constantly, boxes and boxes of books, building a personal library in a farmhouse converted to study. He's working on the great American novel, or so he says, and whether he succeeds or fails is almost beside the point. The trying is what matters, the daily discipline of sitting down to write, of wrestling with words and ideas, of believing that something he creates might matter to someone else. There's the veteran living alone in a cabin in the woods, packages arriving from the VA with medical supplies, someone who came home from war changed and has spent the years since trying to find peace in isolation. The driver doesn't know the full story and doesn't ask, respecting the boundaries that solitude creates, but there's recognition there, an understanding that some wounds don't show, and that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is to let them be alone without making them feel lonely. There's the beekeeper with hundreds of hives scattered across multiple properties, whose packages are always marked with biohazard symbols because they contain live insects, queens being shipped to establish new colonies. He's part of an essential network of people trying to maintain honeybee populations in the face of colony collapse disorder. His work invisible to most people, but crucial to agriculture, to the pollination of crops, to the continuation of systems that feed millions. Each person on the route has a story, has reasons for being here, has chosen or found themselves in this particular place, and has built a life around it. The driver is privileged to glimpse these stories through the packages delivered, through the brief conversations at doors, through the accumulation of small observations over time. This isn't just a job. It's a rolling census of rural America, a daily encounter with the diversity of people and ways of living that exist away from the urban centers that dominate the national consciousness. The romance of rural delivery, such as it is, runs headfirst into the reality of logistics and weather. The distances involved mean that inefficiency compounds quickly. A delivery that takes 5 minutes in execution might require 15 minutes of driving to reach. A package left at the wrong address means backtracking miles rather than blocks. The calculus of route optimization becomes crucial when the route covers 60 or 80 or 100 miles rather than 6 or 8. The handheld device attempts to solve this problem through technology, calculating optimal routes based on algorithms that consider distance and time and package priority. But the algorithms don't know about the bridge that's weight-restricted and can't handle the truck when it's fully loaded. They don't know about the road that turns to pure mud when it rains. They don't know about the address where you absolutely must arrive before noon because the recipient works afternoon shift and won't be home after 12:30. The good drivers learn to override the device when necessary, to trust their accumulated knowledge over the algorithmic optimization. They learn to sequence their stops based on actual conditions rather than theoretical efficiency. They learn that sometimes the longer route is actually faster because the roads are better or because it avoids a railroad crossing that has a train blocking it for 30 minutes every afternoon at 1:15. And then there's the weather. In the city, weather is an inconvenience. In the country, it's an existential challenge. Rain doesn't just make things wet. It makes dirt roads impassable, turns clay driveways into skating rinks, causes creeks to flood over low-water crossings, brings down tree branches onto narrow lanes. The driver has been caught in sudden thunderstorms that turn the world into a gray blur, lightning striking close enough to feel the electricity in the air, visibility dropping to feet rather than yards. Nothing to do but pull over and wait it out. Snow is worse. The rural routes are the last to get plowed if they get plowed at all. Some roads are left to the property owners to maintain, which means maintenance happens if and when someone gets around to it, which might be hours or days after a storm passes. The driver has spent entire days crawling along in four-wheel drive, feeling the truck slide on ice hidden under snow, pumping the brakes carefully to avoid skidding, knowing that one mistake could mean ending up in a ditch or worse. There's an art to driving in snow that can't be taught, only learned through experience. You learn to read the snow itself, to distinguish between the powder that provides some traction and the ice hidden beneath. You learn to feel through the steering wheel when the tires are starting to slip, that subtle loss of connection that precedes a skid. You learn to use engine braking instead of the foot brake. You learn to avoid stopping on hills because getting started again might be impossible. You learn to carry chains and a shovel and sand and a sleeping bag, just in case. The driver has stories about winter storms, about barely making it through routes that should have been impossible, about getting stuck and having to walk to the nearest house for help, about farmers appearing with tractors to pull the truck out of snowbanks. There's a camaraderie that comes from shared struggle against nature, a bond formed between people who understand the stakes. Heat is its own challenge. The truck has air conditioning theoretically, but it's marginal at best and fails completely when the temperature climbs above 90. Summer days mean working in a metal box that becomes an oven, the steering wheel hot enough to burn hands, sweat soaking through clothes within an hour, the physical toll of moving hundreds of packages in that heat adding up to exhaustion by day's end. The driver has learned to start earlier in summer, getting the route done before the worst of the afternoon heat. Has learned to drink water constantly, to recognize the signs of heat exhaustion, to know when to take breaks in the shade versus pushing through. Has learned that some days you just suffer through, that there's no way to make it comfortable, that the only option is to endure. Wind creates its own problems in the rural environment. Not the gusty wind of city canyons, but the sustained wind of open country. The kind that blows steadily at 20 or 30 miles per hour across fields with nothing to break it. This kind of wind makes walking from truck to door an effort, pushes the truck sideways on exposed roads, pulls doors from your hands, turns simple tasks into struggles. And in winter, wind transforms cold into something actively hostile, wind chill driving the effective temperature into the danger zone. The driver has delivered packages in wind, so strong it seemed impossible to make progress, leaning into it at an angle, feeling it try to steal the breath from your lungs. Has fought to keep packages from being blown away, from being torn from hands by gusts that come from nowhere. Has learned which customers will understand if you leave their package in a more sheltered spot rather than exactly where they requested, prioritizing keeping it from blowing into the next county. Tornadoes are rare but not unheard of in this part of the country, and the driver has learned to watch the sky during severe weather, to recognize the sickly green light that sometimes precedes funnel clouds, to know where the nearest sturdy shelter is on every part of the route. Has pulled over during tornado warnings, listening to the radio, watching the sky, ready to abandon the truck and dive into a ditch if necessary. But for all the challenges, for all the difficulties that weather and distance create, there's something satisfying about working in and with the natural world rather than being insulated from it. City drivers work in climate-controlled environments, seeing weather through windows, affected by it only in the abstract sense of traffic and delay. Rural drivers are participants in weather, experiencing it directly, shaped by it, and shaping their work around it. The driver has seen sunrises that defy description, the sky on fire with color, the world transformed into something magical in those moments when night becomes day. Has seen thunderstorms rolling across the plains, the curtain of rain visible from miles away, advancing like an army. Has seen the first snow of winter falling soft and quiet, transforming the familiar landscape into something new and strange. Has seen autumn color at peak, when every tree is blazing and the whole world seems to be burning with life before the long sleep of winter. These experiences aren't incidental to the job. They are the job, or at least part of it, the part that doesn't show up in metrics or performance reviews, but that makes the work worthwhile. The driver isn't just moving packages. He's witnessing the world, seeing it change day by day and season by season, accumulating a wealth of observation that becomes a kind of knowledge unavailable to people who live their lives indoors. By 3 o'clock, the delivery count has climbed past 100. The back of the truck is noticeably emptier now, the packages that filled it to capacity this morning reduced to a manageable remainder. The route is entering its final phase, the last 20 or 30 stops that will complete the day, that will let the driver turn back toward the distribution center and eventually home. The afternoon light has shifted again, the sun lower now, shadows stretching long across the fields, the quality of light becoming softer, more diffuse. This is the golden hour that photographers prize, when everything looks better, when the harshness of midday gives way to something more forgiving. The driver has always loved this time of day, this gentle descent toward evening, the sense that the world is winding down, preparing for rest. The remaining stops are scattered, requiring more driving between them, the route spreading out as it moves into less populated areas. Some of these addresses appear only once every few weeks, packages arriving irregularly to people who order infrequently, who live in places so remote that delivery itself is remarkable. One such address is a hunting camp accessed by a two-track path through forest, barely wide enough for the truck, tree branches scraping against the sides. The path so rough that the suspension bottoms out in the deep ruts. The camp itself is just a simple cabin, no electricity, probably no running water. A place used a few weeks a year during deer season and otherwise sitting empty. But someone has ordered supplies delivered here, preparing for the season that starts in a few weeks, making sure everything needed will be waiting when they arrive. The driver leaves the package on the covered porch, scans it as delivered, and backs carefully out along the same path, grateful that this stop doesn't require turning around, that reverse navigation back to the main road is possible. This is one of those deliveries that might take 45 minutes round trip for a package worth maybe $20, a calculation that makes no economic sense on its own, but that's part of the promise of universal service. The idea that geography shouldn't determine access. Another remote stop is a fire tower, an old structure from the days when spotting forest fires meant having someone physically watching from high places. The tower is still maintained, still occasionally manned during high fire danger periods, and whoever currently has that duty has ordered books and food, supplies to make the solitary vigil more bearable. The driver climbs the stairs with the package, legs protesting the 7 stories of metal steps, emerging at the top to a view that stretches for miles in every direction. The fire watcher is there, a young woman with binoculars and a radio scanning the horizon. She thanks the driver for bringing the package up, says she knows it's beyond what's required, appreciates the effort. They stand for a moment together looking out over the vista, the patchwork of forest and field, the ribbon of river in the distance, the whole landscape laid out like a map, like a promise of territory waiting to be explored. The descent is easier than the climb, and the driver returns to the truck thinking about perspective, about how everything looks different from height, how problems that seem large at ground level appear smaller from elevation, how distance provides clarity that proximity obscures. The fire watcher up there has a job that most people wouldn't want. Hours of solitude broken only by radio check-ins and the occasional visitor. But there's nobility in it too, in watching and waiting, in being the eyes that spot danger before it spreads. The route winds past a Christmas tree farm, though it's too early yet for that season. The rows of firs and spruces are growing, adding another year of height, preparing for the time when families will come to cut their chosen tree, carrying on traditions that connect past and present. The farmer who owns this operation also has a package today, more supplies for the planting and maintenance that fills the off-season, the work that happens out of sight preparing for the public moment of harvest. There's a stop at a small church that serves as the community center for the scattered population of this area. A building that's old but well-maintained, white paint fresh, steeple rising above the trees. The package is for the pastor, probably religious materials or supplies for the congregation. The driver has been inside this church once, invited to a community dinner, and been struck by how the building is clearly loved, how much care goes into maintaining it, how it serves as an anchor for people spread across miles of rural landscape. The next stop is a rural fire station, a single-bay building that houses one truck and serves an enormous territory, staffed by volunteers who respond from home or work when the pager sounds. The driver knows some of these volunteers, has delivered to their houses, understands the commitment they make to their community, dropping everything to respond to emergencies, training on their own time, asking nothing in return except the satisfaction of being useful, of being there when needed. The afternoon is wearing on now, the sun dropping toward the horizon, the shadows becoming more pronounced, the light taking on that particular quality that signals the approach of evening. The driver is feeling the accumulated weight of the day, the constant getting in and out of the truck, the lifting and carrying, the mental effort of navigation and problem solving. But there's satisfaction too, the knowledge that another day is almost complete, that the work has been done well, that every package has found its destination. The last few stops are clustered along a road that runs parallel to a river, houses spaced out but not as far apart as in some sections of the route. This is almost suburban by rural standards, properties of 5 or 10 acres rather than the large farms and forests of the route's more remote sections. The people here are a mix of locals and newcomers, people who work in town but want to live in the country, who have built lives that split the difference between urban and rural. One of these houses belongs to a nurse who works at the same hospital as the driver's wife, though different shifts mean they've never met. The driver knows this only because packages have arrived addressed to her, and the hospital scrubs visible on a clothesline confirm her profession. It's one of those strange connections, these overlaps of lives that only become apparent through accumulation of small details. The way a delivery driver sees into people's lives through their purchases and their possessions. Another house is clearly home to a mechanic, judging by the collection of vehicles in various states of repair scattered across the property, parts and tools visible under carports and in sheds. Today's package is probably more parts, the ongoing process of keeping things running that defines so much of rural life, where repair is valued over replacement, where knowing how to fix things yourself is almost a requirement. There's a house where the owner has created an elaborate Halloween display, even though the holiday is still weeks away. Skeletons and ghosts, fake gravestones and cobwebs, the creative energy of someone who clearly loves this season and wants to share that enthusiasm. The driver has watched this display develop over the past week, new elements appearing with each delivery, and has made a mental note to bring his own family by in the evening when it's all lit up. The second-to-last stop is a small hobby farm, a few acres with chickens and goats and a large garden, run by a couple who both work full-time but farm in the margins, early mornings and evenings and weekends, producing food for themselves and selling a little surplus at the farmer's market. Today's package is animal feed, 50 pounds of grain that the driver hauls from the truck to the barn, leaving it inside where it'll stay dry and safe from wildlife. And then, finally, the last stop of the day, a single-wide trailer on a wooded lot, home to a man who lives alone, whose packages come irregularly but always include books, a reader building a library in isolation. The driver has never had more than a brief interaction here, waves and thanks, the transaction completed quickly. But there's something about this last stop that feels like closing a circle, completing the pattern, finishing what was started 12 hours ago when the truck first pulled out of the distribution center. The package is scanned, placed on the small porch, the confirmation entered into the system. The day's count is complete. 118 deliveries, 23 pickups, 0 failures, 0 returns. The metrics that will be reviewed by supervisors, that will factor into performance evaluations, that will determine whether this route continues to be assigned to this particular driver. But the real measure of the day isn't in those numbers. It's in the elderly woman who got her medication and smiled with relief, in the child who got birthday presents that made them light up with joy, in the farmer who got the part needed to keep equipment running, in the artist who got supplies to continue creating, in all the small ways that delivery service connects people to the things they need and want, making rural life more viable, more comfortable, more connected to the larger world. The drive back to the distribution center takes 45 minutes, most of it on highway, the truck lighter now, easier to handle with most of its load delivered. The radio plays and the driver lets mind drift, not thinking about anything in particular, just decompressing from the day, letting the tension ease out of shoulders and back, feeling the satisfaction that comes from work completed well. The sun is setting as the distribution center comes into view, the western sky painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, clouds catching the last light and reflecting it back down to earth. Other trucks are returning too, drivers completing their own routes, converging back on this point from all their various territories. There's a sense of return, of coming home, even though the actual home is still another 30 minutes away. The truck gets parked in its designated spot, the engine shut off for the last time today. The paperwork gets completed, the handheld device docked and synced, uploading the day's data to servers that will process it all into reports and metrics. The driver punches out, exchanges brief words with colleagues also finishing up, heads to the personal vehicle that's been sitting here all day waiting. The drive home is quiet. No radio this time, just the sound of the truck engine and the wind through the partially open window. The driver is tired, but it's the good kind of tired, the physical exhaustion that comes from honest work, from a day spent in motion, accomplishing things, being useful. The roads are familiar now, driven twice a day, 5 days a week for years, but they're different in evening light than they were in morning darkness. The same curves and hills, the same buildings and landmarks, but transformed by the end-of-day glow, by the knowledge that work is done and rest is coming. The driver thinks about tomorrow, about the route that will be similar but not identical, about the packages that are even now being sorted at the distribution center, prepared for tomorrow's delivery. There will be new addresses mixed in with the familiar ones. There will be challenges and surprises, problems to solve and moments of grace. It will be the same and different, routine and unique, just like every other day. The house appears ahead, lights on in the windows, warm and welcoming. The wife is home, her earlier shift allowing for overlap in this case, a rare synchronization of schedules. Inside there will be dinner and conversation, the simple rituals of domestic life that anchor and sustain, that make all the work and effort worthwhile. The driver parks, gets out, feels the stretch in legs and back, the reminder of 12 hours spent mostly on feet, lifting and carrying and walking. But there's satisfaction too, the knowledge that the work matters, that those 118 deliveries made differences in 118 ways, some large and some small, but all of them real. This is the life of the rural delivery driver. Not glamorous, not particularly well paid, but honest and useful and filled with small moments of connection and beauty. It's work that happens mostly unseen, that people notice only when it fails to happen, when packages don't arrive or arrive late. But it's work that binds together the scattered communities of rural America, that makes it possible for people to live in remote places without giving up access to the wider world. The driver walks to the door, opens it to warmth and light and the smell of cooking, steps inside and sheds the brown uniform, becomes again just a person, just a husband, just someone coming home from a day of work. Tomorrow the uniform will go back on and the cycle will repeat. But tonight, there's rest and food and the company of someone loved, and that's enough. The evening passes in simple pleasures, dinner at the kitchen table, conversation about the day, about news and plans and small concerns. Television watched without much attention, more company than entertainment. The gradual winding down that prepares for sleep, for the next day's early alarm, for the continuation of patterns that define this life. And somewhere out on the route, in all those houses and farms and businesses visited today, packages sit waiting to be opened. Some will be opened tonight, ripped into with excitement or careful anticipation. Others will wait until morning, added to the list of things to be dealt with in the light of a new day. But all of them made their journeys from factories and warehouses, from sellers to buyers, from there to here. And in that movement is the whole story of modern commerce, of connection, of the systems that bind us together across distance and difference. The rural route driver is just one small part of that vast system, one person among thousands who do this work, moving packages from trucks to doorsteps day after day. But in the doing of it, in the attention paid and the care taken, and the relationships built over time, something emerges that's larger than the simple mechanics of delivery. A web of connection, a pattern of service, a quiet contribution to the fabric of community that makes rural life possible and bearable, and sometimes even beautiful. The lights go out in the farmhouse. The night settles in, deep and dark and full of stars. And somewhere already, packages are being sorted for tomorrow's delivery, loaded onto planes and trucks, moving through the night toward their destinations, toward the moment when they'll be picked up by drivers like this one and carried along familiar routes to people waiting for them. The cycle continues, the work goes on, and tomorrow when the alarm sounds at 4:30 in the morning, it will all begin again. The brown truck, the country roads, the packages and the people. The peaceful rhythm of rural delivery, day after day, season after season, year after year. This is the work. This is the life. This is the quiet story of connection and service that happens mostly unseen, but that matters more than metrics can measure.